this morning, I take it?
Not much.
Not enough caffeine? Still working off the alcohol from last night, maybe?
Yep.
My name is Scott Lund. I am the owner of the Intrepid Productions, which is a props and cosplay company. This morning we're going to be talking about weapons and props and making them con safe, and what is acceptable to use, what isn't acceptable to use, what you shouldn't do, and all that great stuff. Want to introduce yourself?
I'm Kent Gooch. I'm the writer for his company. I work for that guy. I've been doing this almost as long as he has.
There you go.
I told him how much richer it is.
He likes to play with swords.
Yeah, I noticed it a lot.
All right, we'll start off with knowing what's con safe and what isn't con safe, especially when you're going to be doing one-off builds. This beauty in particular, for the most part, is con safe, but there's a lot of cons where they'll tell me to take this back to my car. Simply because it is made out of metal and wood. There are a lot of cons out there that do not allow this. As a matter of fact, we were at one 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago at Fort Hood.
Out in Killeen, where pretty much...
This was a big no-no there. This is my Denex replica. It's both realistic and made of metal and wood. It's very heavy.
Prop replicas, as far as what this one is concerned, they're beautiful when you're doing cosplay, especially when you're trying to go for a period-accurate cosplay, such as pirates or western and stuff like our Civil War reenacting. They're great for your cosplay because not only are they made to the specifications of the design, size, and shape, but they are also the proper weight that the real gun is supposed to be. That's why they make a really awesome piece to your cosplay. Now, just keep in mind, there's a lot of right? There are a lot of cons that will not allow props like this. Best way to tell whether or not something like this is allowed is to read the rule book, or go online and look for the con weapons policy online. Pretty much every con that's out there that's established, even first-year cons, have their weapons policy online. This one, however, for the most part, would be acceptable. This is not a prop replica. This one's actually a lighter.
He's slightly undersized from historically accurate.
The handle and the grips of this one are actually plastic. The material, the makeup of the body of the gun is a light alloy that is cast. I believe so. Yeah. So a lot of cons, well, they will reject this one. They will allow you to carry this one. So once again, keep in mind the weapons policy. Look online while you're planning out and building your props, so you're not making the wrong thing. Have a nice, beautiful prop built, and you get to con and you can't carry around and showcase your piece.
When in doubt, email them. They
Yeah.
will be happy to
Now,
explain
to
it.
get around this rule, let's say like this little darling I've got sitting right here on my table. Let's say this one is not allowed because it has a metal stock, or a metal barrel, metal receiver, and a wood stock. You can still make your wood stock. Instead of putting a metal barrel on it, paint PVC and put PVC on them. Now the barrel is made of plastic. Perfectly acceptable. Once again, it's all up to the con and their weapons policy. Preferably, I like having the metal barrels. It looks realistic, it looks awesome. You can't scratch the paint on metal because it's not painted.
And the balance of the weapon ends up much, much nicer. The PVC barrel, because it's so much lighter, throws all the weight to the back, and it doesn't look, it doesn't feel quite right. The weight balance.
Oh, yeah.
The balance.
The only other disadvantage to PVC, even though it does make it con acceptable, is we live in Texas. Transport of said item, especially with as hot as it gets, PVC can warp and bend. So down the road, your prop could, you know, look a little wonky because it did get.
I cheered my PVC girl. I ran a wood dowel down it and taped that bad wood so it would fit just like a slug.
Nice.
And it didn't fit.
Nice. Very nice. I've never thought of that before.
I cheat hard.
See, I told you you should get your relief. Keep in mind when you are building the materials you're using, especially with heat and stuff like that. Same thing with certain foams. Like I said, we live in Texas. It can warp, it can melt. So there are ways to protect that from happening, usually with some form of hardening foam, if you're working with foam. Whether it be coating it with urethanes or straight up fiberglassing. I love the fiberglassing method because it's relatively permanent and it's not going to peel off. Because fiberglass sticks to everything. Stuff you don't want to stick to. It makes a whole mess. Now, now making one-offs like this, there's a lot of power tools. You use a lot of power tools on this stuff. This particular gun, I used 3 different saws and a Dremel and a router. For those of you who are not very savvy in the shop, keep in mind shop safety. I always go over shop safety in all of my panels. Yeah, we like to keep 10 fingers. Keep in mind what the tools you're using can do, will do, and how they will hurt you. I've seen people run routers and drills and Dremels and saws into their hand before. It makes a horrible mess. It hurts a lot, and 9 times out of 10, it delays the making of your product.
Sometimes you just got to
Corrosive. Your tools don't like it.
Yeah, that's true.
What's corrosive? You lose your edge in the saw.
Yeah, keep in mind the safety of your tools. The other thing, the other side of safety glasses. I have a lot of people on my earplugs.
Oh yeah.
I'm hard hearing already.
Yeah.
Earplug and safety glasses. There's a lot of people in my shop think it's not important until they go working on a project and go to milling on a piece of wood and a big old splinter in their eye and have to go to the hospital because they scratched the cornea. It's not fun. I've done it before myself. It sucks. You can't see out of that eye for about a week. Safety is number one anytime you're in a shop, especially when you're doing one-off customs like this and you're working with heavy machinery. Be aware what the tools can do and how they will hurt you. Other than that, have fun with it. Think outside the box. I always go off into the steampunk tangent when I'm doing this because I'm an avid steampunker and we love having fun with things. When I say think outside the box, pretty much anything in your house, and I'm notorious for this, even going to Home Depot, can be used for something that it is not intended for. Let's take, once again, because it's out here, this particular gun on my table. The only thing that was used for its intended purpose as a gun on that particular prop is the basic which I started with, which was a Daisy BB gun that I completely cannibalized, disassembled, made it non-functioning so it would be con-safe. You can't even cock it anymore. It's pretty much locked into position where you can't work the action. Other than that, everything else was something completely different. The wood itself was a 2x6 truss that I pulled out of a demolition project because I used to work construction a long time ago. The piping is, I think, 1.5-inch conduit pipe, which I got at Home Depot. The scope is a telescope that I found in the trash, and the scope mount, this nice, really pretty brass piece right here, is the plate for a 4-panel light switch that I picked up at a thrift shop for 50 cents. Heated that bad boy up, bent over, and made a scope mount. For the most part, whether it's guns, swords, or props in general, you can use the most obscure things, take them out of context, modify it, and turn it into a really awesome prop. Let's take, for example, Jet over here. He is really innovative with taking stuff that is normal, everyday items, modifying them, adding to it, taking away, and turning into a really amazing prop for an awesome cosplay.
Okay. The staff, that's a photographic monopoly. $9 at National Outdoors. And the beauty of it is, to get my little Lancer yes, transportable. Backpack was a sprayer from Harbor Freight and Tools. They got on sale. They're going to sell better next week. Darn it. The McAndrites, they are not tentacles. I am not a tentacle monster. This is a McAndrite. To make it fit like that, has 16th-inch galvanized wire, run in a piece of wire sheeting through that, then with a 3-strand cable together, so it can actually hold and move. This is an old flashlight from Black & Decker. The key to making it work safely is make sure you know how much space it takes, and if you hit someone with it, you will not go to jail or get beat up. This piece, the bottom of it is switchable. It has a soft piece where I can turn that screw down. It's got a steel pin on there to drive into the ground. So I make sure it never gets spun down.
Most tripods or monopods have that.
And some cons will tell you can't carry that because.
Exactly. Good idea.
And if you want to use metal and don't really have to do a con, just spray that bad boy hard with a plastic covering and it will go. Not that you heard that from me. So yeah, this was routed. This was run on a tabletop router to get that edge. And we have 10,000 RPMs, carbide tip blade, 1.5 inches from your hand. You will do it when you are fully awake and carefully.
Yes, most definitely. And with some of the stuff, models and props that I make, I mean, I literally have to cut like 1/4-inch slivers of wood, and my fingers are like, my fingernails literally almost scraping the blade of that saw.
Learn if the wood's big enough, you can screw another piece of wood to it and use that to maneuver it.
Oh yeah, I mean, trust me, I'm definitely paying attention 100% of the time while I'm working it through.
But if you do it badly, you can play Frodo.
That is true. That is very true. Yeah, think outside the box when you're building props.
Sorry to interrupt everybody.
Left them sitting on the table.
There's enough people around. I'm pretty sure it's good. Think outside the box. You can still make something. You can still make a costume and make it look screen accurate with your props, and still just using random junk around your house. One of the best places to start. Everybody has one. How many people have that one drawer in your kitchen that has just everything in it? How many people have seen the item at the very bottom of that drawer?
In the last 6 months.
Did you make that in years?
Yeah, exactly. Well, when you're looking for inspiration on props, and especially this, that one little item that's just going to take your prop over the top, and you're not quite sure what to put on there or where to go. What I tell people all the time is take that drawer, pull it all the way out, go into your dining room table, and just dump it on the table. Start sorting through it. You'd be surprised. You'd come up with like, oh, that's perfect. Go back to your shop and continue working. How many times have you done that?
Daily.
I do it all the time
And
too.
they phrase the drawer? No, the room.
Yes.
I've got several rooms.
I did one.
I've been yelled at before for disassembling parts of actual working pieces in the house because it was just the right shape or something.
You know the standard
We
form
go into places like Home Depot and Walmart where most people see, housewares, we see spare parts.
Give them a standard warning on springs and things you might salvage.
Oh,
Yes.
springs. In steampunk, one of our favorite things to play with is clocks. Old blocks, preferably broken old blocks, because we don't want to cannibalize something that's perfectly working if we don't have to, especially when it comes down to antiques. Now, when you're tearing apart these blocks, they've got amazing brass parts and gears and amazing giant springs inside of them. In the steampunk world, we call these things, well, there's two names for them, the coils of death and the steampunk landmine. These springs inside the block are this big around. Now, when the tension is released on the spring goes from this big around to this big around in a fraction of a second. Yes, they are hardened steel, really hard to cut through and almost impossible to drill through. And it is extremely yeah, they're extremely dangerous. I've seen lots of shop accidents with these particular items because somebody didn't know how to release the tension on the spring properly. I've seen people almost cut a finger off, and the worst case that I've seen so far is somebody wasn't paying attention, didn't know how to release the tension on the spring set free, and it caught him in the face from here to here. And it cut his face from here to here. Which it looked pretty gross, but now he's got a really awesome battle scar and a really cool story. But yes, when you are tearing apart items, do be careful. A lot of times, and a lot of the big ones that I hear people, and they've got old TVs sitting around, or old electronics sitting around, and they want to go tearing into it for parts. Because if you're working on cyberpunk or mech or steampunk, there's a lot of really cool parts inside of it. Yeah, there are a lot of really cool parts inside of them. But once again, be careful, be aware of what they can do to you. There's a lot of electronics, and especially TVs and amplifier, like newer amplifiers and stuff like that. They've got capacitors inside of them. A TV's capacitor can hold up to 150,000 volts for about 10 years. And if you happen to accidentally discharge that capacitor, they do have the capability of stopping your heart. I'm not telling you don't get creative and tear stuff apart and have fun with it and make really cool things. I'm just telling you be careful. Be aware of what you're working with. Be aware of what it can do to you and how it can hurt you. Just like shop tools, potential parts can also be just as dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Now, I've had a lot of fun with capacitors, especially if you take a disposable 35mm camera with a flash. It's got a nice little capacitor that's about that big, and it holds about 20,000 volts. And if you take that camera and open it up and attach it to a couple of little wire to the each side of the capacitor, make sure you discharge the capacitor first. Attach a couple of little wires to each side of that capacitor, put the camera back together, put the battery in it. Charge up the flash, walk up to somebody, push the button, hold it up to their arm. You just created a taser.
This brings us to the point.
Now, the capacitor in a camera isn't enough to seriously hurt somebody, but it is enough to really get their attention. They will know you were there. Now, don't quit doing that. I mean, you know, it's bad. It is really fun though. Keeps people on their toes.
I grabbed a flyback transformer once.
Yeah?
Yeah, there's a reason called a flyback transformer. You touch it,
Make hair in your backstage though?
well, what there is. But
Or it just sizzle off?
it was only 15, 20,000 volts. It just got my attention.
For 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, when you're working on other props other than guns, like his axe he's got going on there, or swords, what type of foam did you use for that?
This is actually now sold at Home Depot and Lowe's for crafters. It's 1-inch thick foam. It's thicker than a regular wallboard. It's 1 inch thick, which is exactly 1/4 inch too thick for my router. But it is wonderful because at 1 inch, you don't have to worry about laminating. It's fairly strong, and it comes in a 2x2 sheet, which you need in your car, instead of an 8x4 sheet. Which
I always have to cut them down.
Yeah. When you forget your knife, it's no good.
Yeah.
You always hope to get that.
breaks weird. But yeah, crafting foam and insulation foam works really well too. I love the pink insulation foam that you can get at Home Depot because you can sculpt it really well and you can it takes the sanding really well too. You can pretty much shape it to whatever you want. And then you can harden it with different what's the name of that stuff?
Polyurethane.
Yeah, polyurethanes. There's a particular product somebody was just telling me about that I actually want to check out. I can't remember the name of it right now, but literally you put it on, you brush it on or spray it on, and it cures just like plastic.
Yeah, Verathane.
Yeah, there you go.
You put 12 coats of Verathane on something, it's no longer foam. It's now
And
hard to implement.
it's one of those it's foam friendly. It doesn't eat the foam. To where most polys will
But
eat foam.
propellant does.
Do what?
The propellant does.
Yeah.
If you actually want a foam that is paint safe and pellet safe, it's a foam called EPP, and it is damn near indestructible.
How expensive is it though?
You're gonna pay for a 9mm sheet of it about $13 for something that tall and that wide. But you can make RC airplanes out of it, collide them into each other, and they will keep flying. They just bounce,
Nice.
even at 60 to 70 to 90 miles an hour. When you work at a hobby shop, you find some pretty interesting stuff. EPP foam, it's great for battle.
Don't do a lot of foam work, particularly I'll do wood and steel. If you're doing foam, there will be people who tell you to use hot wire. Hot wires are wonderful, they really are. Once you learn to use it by destroying 300 pieces of foam first.
But you won't even notice the time playing with the hot wire foam. You just
If you find it with your wrist, that's fun too. So you might as well start with a knife.
What was the name of the stuff you said, the hardening Verathane, is it?
Verathane, that's the actual brand name. There's several companies. Verathane's from the 50s. They used to use it to, when you bought a plywood boat, or a hole in the water, which was more money, you just kept layering Verathane on it, and it's wonderful stuff. It
And
ain't
like I
cheap,
said,
but
it hardens just as hard as plastic. And it's usually paint ready too.
Now, I coated this with a nice cheap hobby plain paint first before I sprayed it with the Verathane, because the Verathane itself won't hurt most phones, but the propellant that they use, if it's too close, will. So you either do this or pre-paint.
That was an epic pose. Do that again.
I pre-paint. Oh yeah, and when you do something like this, when you sneeze, I don't care how much you want to use that hand. All the tips are from Harbor Freight Tool. My voice is low, I have a bunch of rasps here. I bought all the ones that don't have a point, but they are all steel, hardened steel, and I painted them so people think they're not like hardened steel. I'm good with that.
Now, when you're working with foams, how many people have a old electric turkey knife that they never use anymore sitting in their kitchen? That thing is amazing when it comes to cutting foam. Doesn't matter what type of foam you're cutting. It can be like couch cushion foam, which a lot of people use for like the big plushie costumes, or the hardened foam, like the insulation foam and stuff like that. Those electric knives will cut through that foam like a hot knife through butter. Instead of sitting there with a kitchen knife and just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and tearing up your foam because it likes to cause great big chunks.
And bread knives are good too.
Yeah. Even with a bread knife, I've had where it'll take big old chunks out of the foam because there's that one part of the knife that isn't quite sharp enough. But that electric knife will just like zip right through it. It's almost like, you know,
It's a power weapon.
it's about the difference of using a handsaw on a piece of wood and taking a skill saw across it. And it's amazing for carving foam. I definitely suggest if you're going to get into working, especially if you're going to make foam props and stuff like that, like swords or axes and stuff. Get a hold of an electric knife if you don't have one.
Tin plates. If you make a hard-board tin plate, like I did for this blade, it means that if you should not succeed the first time, which happens, you just lay that tin plate on the foam, and you don't have to start from scratch.
The first time, there's times where it doesn't get right, they don't get it right the fifth time. But I didn't mess up five times. I just found 5 ways not to make something.
To avoid voyage of discovery.
Exactly.
They're not failures, they're just happy mistakes.
Exactly.
The other thing is phone props often need to be repaired, so a template will make the repairs quick and painless.
And white glue, bring white glue, and toothpicks.
I like wood glue. Wood glue works really, really well with foam.
Yes, it does. It's white glue on steroids.
Yeah. 9 times out of 10 when I'm building foam props, how many of you seen the Weeping Angels bouncing around yesterday? They're going to be out again today. Those wings, the core of those wings is the pink insulation foam that you can get at Home Depot, just sculpted and carved down and wood glued together. When you're working, like we were talking about earlier, with pellets and stuff like that, the way I protect all my foam products from anything poly-based is a nice coating of wood glue around the entire project. It helps add a little bit of rigidity to it. So like as you're finishing your project, you're not going to ding up or gouge your foam, because some of the foams, like the insulation foam, you can gouge it really easy. And on top of that, it protects it from, let's say, like if you're going to fiberglass your crop to make it hard, or use Bondo or spray paint, it won't eat the foam.
Bondo is a wonderful tool. In the 1960s, people would beat up Camaros. It is not fun to play with.
Oh, it's not fun to play with, but I can get some amazing effects with Bondo.
Yeah?
That and Bondo is a lot easier to sand than fiberglass is.
Yes.
To it. Yeah. Now, when you're working, if you are going to be working with Bondo and fiberglass, make sure you do it outside. It does have a horrible smell. Make sure you're wearing a respirator, well-ventilated area, all that yada stuff. Do keep in mind that those type of products are chemical. They do work on a chemical reaction because you're mixing 2 products together. So keep in mind what that stuff heats up. So you want to take your time while you're doing that. Let the products completely cool down before you go applying another layer. I have seen people just try to rush through a project. They'll put on a layer of fiberglass, and they want to make it sturdier, so they'll throw on another layer of fiberglass, and another layer of fiberglass. Well, now they're superheating it because they're not letting it cool down, and they'll catch the project on fire because it's gotten too hot. So that is another thing you need to be aware of when you're working with products like that. You can cause a flash fire if you're not careful with the project, or the product that you're putting on your project. So it's another safety tip when you're working on stuff to keep in mind while you're going through your projects. We want to see you make amazing things. We want to see, and we want to see them at con, and we want to see you do it safely.
We can see you at con.
We don't want to see you on the news.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We want to see you at the con, not on the news. Right. Now, keeping in mind, I was saying being con safe and stuff like that. I always tell this story. I promised this man I would tell the story at all my props panels. Yes. It was
Wonderful and auditory.
Yes. It's a rule that we call just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. I've got this wonderful friend who lives in Austin who has the knowledge and the ability to make a working flamethrower, and he made a wrist-mounted flamethrower on his gauntlet, and he brought it to con. Actually, he was functional and everything was connected. And he decided during one of his props panels he wanted to display it. So he had everybody go outside to the parking lot, and all of us got you kind of flamethrower shooting flames in the air. One of the people that was in his panel just happened to be an off-duty ATF agent.
He admitted he's breaking Class 3 laws, and that's a 10-year penalty that you federal penitentiary.
Yes. Which he quickly disassembled the prop, disposing of all of the items relatively quick. Ray talked about his racer. I don't know. What are we doing out here?
And now our friend is quite familiar with San Antonio Police Department.
So yeah, I throw that story out there just because you want to get creative with something. It's like, hey, let's make a flamethrower. Hey, let's make it functional. It's probably not good. Just like my little disposable camera recipe that I gave you guys. Yeah, leave that at home.
Don't bring that to home. The propane powered marshmallow cannon. Leave that at home. Marshmallow cannon. Yeah, I know it sounds awesome. Leave it at home.
Propane, use hot, it's cheaper.
Yeah, with propane, I can still eat the marshmallows. The Aquanet makes the marshmallows little and edible.
If you're going to build a rifle, a machine gun, sniper cannon, invest in a decent sling. Because you're going to carry this all day long.
Yes.
You will notice that real soldiers have slings. There's a reason. And do not buy a 1-inch piece of nylon. That is not a sling, that is a self-torture implement. Go get a sling. Go to the sling store and get a real sling. You will be happy with it.
Or I made surplus.
I made mine out of leather.
Yep. So do I. I go to Walmart, they have new leather. I use the best tool in the world, money.
For those of us who like some of that, we spend a little more time.
That is definitely one thing. Just like any cosplay or prop, you can your friend here just said that you can either spend a lot of money or you can invest a lot of time. Well, it's a fine balance. Usually, the more money you spend, the less time you put into a project, or the less money you put into a project, the more time you're going to spend on the project. It's a delicate balance there. I mean, there are a few projects where it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to spend a god money and spend a lot of time on it. Especially when you get into some like really, really intricate projects.
Articulated
His
armor.
costume, for example,
Yeah.
did not happen in 4 days, I'm sure.
Well, it depends what planet. 4 days on Jupiter, maybe.
Here it was like maybe 5 days.
And but it sucks. Make it as light as you can.
Oh yeah, most definitely. As far as like this prop here, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. But yeah, it does weigh a lot. It's cool to walk around with for 5 minutes. For my steampunk costume, I have one that's really similar to it that I carried around. It actually has a sling on it. And even with that sling and all of my steampunk gear on, I can tolerate that gun for maybe 30 minutes, and then I'm taking it back to my table because it is heavy. And with, like I said, with the rest of my gear on, my giant armor and stuff like that, my shoulder says, I don't want to do this anymore. Don't put me away.
Ask them what kind of weapons they're looking at building.
About 20 minutes left. Yeah. What do you guys? Are you guys got any projects out there that you're working on? Something that you kind of up in the air about? Yes.
I'm working on a design for a giant foam sword from an anime. I mean, it's going to be like yay thick with foam, and it's going to be like 5-6 foot long. I did a little bit of research on the internet using like fiberglass cores or carbon fiber for the core. But when the blade is, like yay thick, can you have free floating cores glued into the foam? Or do they need to be
If you see my Commissar sword, my best is the Commissar 40 kpm chain sword. It's about this long.
Is it a homemade one or is
Oh
it?
yeah, it's homemade.
Okay. I was wondering if maybe it was a Nighthawk.
I built it. Just stiffen it up, take your foam, cut a line, and put in a couple of curtain rods. The oval curtain rod steel, they lay flat, they're stiff, and they're cheap. You can lay them inside the center of your sword, and you're done.
I'm sorry about, to keep it from flexing too much, would it be
Put four.
a good idea to put them in various locations?
Give them a chance, make 4 channels, 2 in the center, 2 on the outside, and voila, it is not going to go to the magnetometer, but it will decon safe, and it won't be done.
Carbon fiber also really well.
Most of the Amguard people, what they use in their swords is they will go to thrift stores and buy golf clubs and cut the club off the golf club and run that at the center of their sword.
cheapest way to get a carbon fiber rod. To add to what he had to say, make sure that you have at least one of those rods goes all the way through the tang, which means go through the grip. Otherwise, it's going to flex right there at the key ends, and you're going to hold your sword up, and it's going to go.
If it doesn't go like this, it's going to break off.
And it's very embarrassing.
I actually know somebody who was cosplaying a Link, and she made this beautiful freaking Master Sword. And I was like, that is great, how'd you make it? It's like, oh, I just made it out of the pink insulation foam. I was like, what'd you do to stiffen it? She was like, what do you mean? I was like, what'd you reinforce the center with? I was like, I didn't, I just carved it out of foam. I was like, you do realize, 'cause she made a sheath and everything. The first time she went to go pull it out, the handle broke clean off from the blade.
I heard you just listening to it.
Yes, it does.
Wonderful job on the sculpt. It looked amazing, especially even after the paint and everything was done. It looked beautiful. But she just missed one crucial step.
You have a long enough drill bit, you can drill down the center, drill down the back, and put the wood down. But
Oh, that's what I told her to do. I was like, you're gonna have to drill out. The only problem with that method is trying to keep it straight.
Yes.
Well, if you have a tall drill press,
Well,
we got a lot of drill
press
press
around.
Question back there?
Yes.
I prefer working with wood, like making wooden weapons and stuff, but the problem with wood, which you probably know, weighs a lot more than foam and stuff does. Is there any type of wood that I can get or decent balsa wood?
Balsa wood works. Also, what's that? I want to say wax.
Bass?
Huh?
yeah, basswood.
Yeah, basswood. Yeah, basswood also works really well. It's about the same tensile strength as yellow pine, but half the weight. Actually, it sands down a lot better too than like yellow pine and stuff like that. You can get a lot smoother sand on it. As far as your finish, you don't have to use nearly as much product on that particular type of wood to delete the wood grain either. So that's the basswood works really well for props like that. Yes.
Where did you get that?
Yeah.
Hobby shop.
Hobby shop?
Hobby shops. There's you can find it online if you don't have a hobby shop near you that has it. Like your local lumber yard's usually not going to carry anything like that. If there's a cabinet shop or anything like that in the area, a lot of times those people have some of that stuff in stock because they use it for certain things. But 9 times out of 10, something like that, you're going to have to go online for it.
You're going to put it down, in and down,
Do what?
in and down. You're pin it together because they're 2 arms 5 feet long.
Yeah.
They're 2-foot chunks at best.
For spears, stabs, big hammers like this one here, axes, that kind of thing, you can also borrow a trick from the SCA. They use rattan, which is a type of bamboo. It's lightweight, it's very, very strong. It doesn't flex as much as regular bamboo does, so it'll stay fairly stiff. And it'll make some of these longer ones, it doesn't work so well for swords because it's always round, but for some of these ones with a haft, it'll help reduce your weight.
Any more projects that people are working on? You know, like you're just not quite sure how to get over that hurdle. Yes.
I'm in the process of making Heathcliff's armor and sword and shield, and I'm not quite sure how to start on the shield since it's got the curve and everything. Like I said, I like working with wood, so I want to make a lightweight wooden sword and shield.
You can actually, if you want to make it out of wood, you can. If you get between 1.25 inch plywood and you soak it, you can actually warp it into a curved shape to start a base of a shield on, and then build up your like you did like the insignia and stuff like that. Carve it out of wood and stuff like that, and also you can bend it too. If you make it all out of plywood, you can bend it all to fit that curve. The only trick is, you've got to soak it for like a good day, and then before you soak, you got to have a buck, if you will, that shield can sit over, and then clamp it all the way around, clamp it down in place, and let it sit in the sun for about 3-4 days. And when you pull your clamps off, that shield is going to have that nice crest to it. And like I said, do the same thing with like border material that you're going to be using if you want to make it out of wood too, or the insignia and stuff like that. After you get your shield bent, use that same plug to bend everything else that you're going to be putting on it. But like I said, you got to soak it for at least a day, a good day, make sure it's soaked really well, and then have it sitting in the sun for at least 4 to 5 days to make sure it's completely dry.
For articulate shapes like a shield you're going to make, if you either rent, buy, or acquire a projector for transparencies, print off the image you want to make from the net, and then push that transparency and project it onto your material. You now can just trace it on there, and you don't have to guess if you got that art right. And, yeah, cheap art.
Yes.
I've made a scythe before, but I made it out of wood and it was way too heavy, so I wanted to remake it out of foam. Well, at least the blade part, what should I use to reinforce so that it connects to the handle as well? Handle that curve.
What material are you using for the handle itself?
PVC pipe.
PVC pipe?
Dowel, and insert the foam into this hollow piece, and I can pressure fit it with rolls and rolls of tape.
One of the other tricks that I've used in the past, which works relatively well if you can get it right, as you're making it, especially if you do it in halves and glue it together, you can actually set nuts into your foam.
Plastic nuts, preferably.
Plastic, yeah. If not, you can put metal ones in there. And then run a bolt. Make sure it's long enough that'll go through the PVC itself. I'm sorry, make sure it's long enough to go through the PVC and into your nuts that you can set in your foam. Then glue your foam together with the bolts in there, and then finish your project. Then pull your bolts out, drill holes through your PVC, put your scythe blade on there, and just run the nuts back in there. If you glue it right, and especially if you use wood glues, I love using wood glue for foam because it holds the best as far as I've found when it comes to working with foam. Those nuts should never come out, especially if it's put in the right way. And if you coat the outside with a harder where it's not going to pull right out.
If you're using closed cell foam, you can use two-part epoxy,
Yeah, that's true.
which is forever and a day.
But yeah, that's another way, like his method, like he was explaining, and that's another method that you can get it to attach on there. Any other projects out there? Questions, comments? If you, there we go.
Method, can you still use that over painted stuff or would it be preferred to do it before you paint?
9 times out of 10, you want to do it before you paint your project. Wood glue has this really bad habit, I don't care what type of paint you use, of pulling the paint off your project. Let's say you can take just like a little puddle of wood glue, like as a test, and drop it on your project and go to picking at it, and that wood glue will pop right off and pull the paint off the project with it. So 9 times out of 10, you want to treat your project, put your wood glue down, and then paint over the wood glue.
2 days later.
Yeah. It does take a while to dry when you coat something.
As far as adhesives go, if you're curious about what type of adhesive, what brand of adhesive will make the bond between this material and that material, thisToThat.com is your friend. It's a database you put in. I want to connect wood to metal, and it gives you a list. of
They literally
everything that will make that bond.
Yeah, this and that is a really good database when it comes down to adhesives, especially when you're working on projects, because let's face it, there are some projects out there where you tried every glue in your house, and whatever it is you're trying to put together just is not sticking. It keeps falling off. And like you was saying, thisToThat.com is the best place to go for that. They literally have a formula for everything. I think they have a formula for gluing children to walls. I think somebody's actually looked it up and it's recommended adhesive for it.
Sticky back tape and Velcro.
Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
Would you
Do what?
How would you make foam for the example?
It's all in your paint. There's a lot of different things you can use out there. You can throw down a base coat of primer, and you can get various different metallic like spray paints. And if it's not quite the right look you're going for, it's a little bit messy, but it's effective. There's a product out there called Rub and Buff. It comes in pretty much every metallic color out there. I know there's at least 4 different silvers, from brilliant silver all the way to antique silver. Same thing with gold, brass. They've got patina Rub and Buff, and the way the product works is exactly what the name is. You rub it on, you buff it out. By the time you're done, it almost looks like a piece of dull metal. Yes.
You have to seal it. And there's only one sealer that works, but I don't remember off the top of my head the name of it.
Well, if you put Rub and Buff on there correctly, especially if you're going over primer, it doesn't come off that easily. I mean, it will scratch, just like paint and stuff like that.
I'm not so worried about it coming off the project, because it's not enough for it to come off the project, but it's on.
Oh, cleaning out and getting it off your fingers?
You know, like, you're walking around with a prop, and you've got sweaty hands, whatever, you gotta adjust something, and you're constantly more rubbing buff.
Well, if you buff out Rub and Buff correctly, because it is a waxed base, if you buff it out correctly, it eventually will get to a state where you can go like that, and it'll no longer transfer off you anymore. It'll have a waxy, plasticky feel to it.
I've had some luck with Future Floor Wax. I think it's a wonderful sealer for a lot of things.
But yeah, like I said, it's a messy, extended process when you're using Rub and Buff. But the buffing part is where it actually fuses almost fuses the Rub and Buff to itself. And like I said, it has a waxy finish to it, and it no longer will come off on your hands anymore. It's just that the buffing stage takes a little bit, and if you get to that point where it won't come off.
And you can also use leaf.
Leaf?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you want to look like metal, you can sheet leaf on it. It's actual metal foil, and you glue it on there and roll it out pretty, and it's beautiful. I'm not going.
It is an amazing effect. You can almost get props to get almost as high shiny as this brass on this thing here. It is a very messy, painstaking, long process, and if you've got the patience to go through the tedious process, yeah, you can. The leaf paper is really great. And you can do a lot of great effects with it too. And that is also when you're using leaf, you have to clear coat. Because any little rub against it, if you don't protect it, will scratch it. Even if you do get that high, chrome shine to it, anything that rubs against it will find scratches in it if you don't use clear coat to protect it.
And there's also a metallic paint for airplane models. They cost like $12 an ounce. But when you're finished, it's called Illuminate? Luminize. And it will look like buff aluminum. And it will cost like buff gold. But it does look great.
I've never used that before. Now, if you've really got deep pockets, the best way to go is automotive grade paint. Automotive grade paint, if you go through the 3-step paint process with the primer, base, and clear, you can beat that against the wall and it will hardly chip. That paint will last forever. And you can get some really awesome colors and get some really great effects with automotive paint. But once again, you better have,
$60 a pint.
Yeah, you better have a small vault inside your living room that's filled with gold bars if you're going to paint props with automotive grade paints.
Automotive grade paint is about $600 a gallon.
Yeah, I know. So I say you better have a small vault of gold bars. But it is the most durable paint for props. It's just not a lot of people use it because it's so dang expensive.
And you gotta know how to lay it down properly. And kill it.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left. Any more questions, comments, concerns, anyone? Yes.
Using like fiberglass or carbon fiber boards or something like the Katana that has a curve, is there a way to force the core to stay in that curved shape So you don't have to only do straight plates?
Depending on the material you're using, if you're using like a metal-based material, say like aluminum or even like a metal rod, you can use a pipe bender to get that curved shape to where you can. I mean, you almost have to map it out precisely with your phone and your core itself. But you can use a pipe bender to like get a subtle curve in that core before you glue your project together, and that way you get that.
Would that work like fiberglass? Because from what I was reading, those are the best for like flexibility to make sure that they don't just snap or something like that.
As far as a fiberglass core, you have to find something that's already in that curved shape.
Oak are bent woods. You can bend your core just like you bend a oak. Just get a piece of wood, steam it real hard, make your shape on board with dowels, and force that wood in there. It's like a stay for a ship.
Yeah. I mean, similar to what I was talking about with the plywood. If you like, you was talking about the steamer. If you just soak the wood and you put it in a
Guide.
yeah, dye. There you go. Another brain part. Put it in the dye, and especially if you let it sit out in the sun, that sun will bake dry it, and when you pull it out, it's going to be in that shape. It's stay in that shape. That's
Actually,
actually
take it to the airport and they won't arrest you much.
So they still require you to put that under the plate.
You might get up to just about a minute.
yes.
If you have a PVC core, you fill it with sand, you heat up as much as you want, and it'll stay the same diameter.
Another choice on stitching barrels, that foam stuff for sealing cracks in the walls of your house.
Expanding foam.
Expanding
Yes.
foam.
I use that on a lot of stuff.
PVC spray it. It's not going to bend much.
Expanding foam on the outside in the bowl, like a cereal bowl, will give you a shape for making great big bulky anime style cauldrons, and then you just carve it down into the shape you want. It's a wonderful.
The good thing about spray expanding foam is if you mess up, you just grab the can and do a little squirt right there, let it expand it back out, and then you start carving.
It's like fiberglass, this
So
glues
do we all
everything
have
to
stock in
everything.
Home Depot? Because we all should for this hobby.
Right. It's pretty bad when you go to Home Depot and they don't ask you what home improvement project you're working on. Although I am happy to see that they now have an actual hobby section.
Really?
Yes, Home Depot has a hobby section where you can go in, you can get battery packs, LED lights, various
Hot knives.
Yeah, hot knives, cords, so you can get resistors. It's like it's about this wide, and I think it's usually around the hardware section. It's like they took a little slice of Radio Shack and said, "Here you go."
Half the price.
By the way, if you live in the DFW area and you're looking for someplace to actually build and buy Arduino or circuits or LEDs or little controllers or type of screens, Micro Center at Spring Valley in 75 has a complete section of that stuff. They have soldering irons, they have solder suckers. It's like fries, except for the people there actually know what they're talking about.
Like, so is where I do all my computer shop.
Where I live, the closest thing we got to that is fries.
Wait, you live in Houston, right? There's a Micro Center in Houston.
Where at?
It's North Houston, I believe, we're in Woodlands.
Oh yeah, that's why I live down by Galveston.
It's a trip for you, but it is well worth it. If you can visit there while you're here, check it out. It's 75 Central Expressway and Spring Valley. It's just north of 635 and 75.
If you're doing a gun prop, you can get some really realistic guns. I have a M1 Garand, a plastic casting for customized anymore. And I would walk across this street, have ran me down, asked me if it was loaded. Yeah.
Oh, let's touch on that real quick. Let's talk about bananas, shall we?
Okay, so Space City Con in Houston, just a few weeks ago.
Before we tell this story,
All right.
we love cosplay. We love to see all the amazing props, especially when you're talking about weapons and such. Just remember, when you leave the con, be aware of your costume. Because I wear my
It's pretty much
cosplays.
normal for me.
Yeah, we wear our
That's
cosplays
not
so
normal
much.
for those people out there.
We wear our cosplays so much, it's pretty much become normal clothing for us.
It's not.
So, remember McCurdy's banana? I look over the hotel, no bananas. I leave the con. I go down the street, go into a couple convenience stores, and I'm carrying my rifle, and I've got both my pistols in this outfit. And I'm asking, do you sell fresh fruit? A member of our group needs a banana. No luck. I go into Starbucks, find a banana. I'm on my way out of Starbucks, 7 Houston Police Department cars in the parking lot. I'm like this with the banana and the rifle. I belong to the con at the Marriott. Everything is replica. Please contact the luck. Don't shoot. So a banana, a lighter, and 2 lighters and a replica almost got me shot in Houston. Because I didn't take the time to stop back at the table before leaving the car.
To what?
Would be a hectic story, but no.
He was escorted back to the con in the back of a cop car.
They said they had about 30 calls at that point into the con, or into the police department, and they were still getting calls over dispatch about the guy walking down the street dressed as a cowboy in armor. And they didn't want 10 more calls as I go around the corner.
There's this crazy pirate-looking gunslinger downtown Houston. He's pretty menacing. Go check it out.
At least I left the swords at the table.
Carrying a rifle in Texas down that street, you would not break the law.
All right, guys.
Leave that.
Girlie at the door told me it was time. I'm sorry we have to cut this panel off. I'm pretty sure the next panel is like theirs. Yeah, she is.